Sydney YIMBY was formed in April this year. This is a Yes in My Backyard group. Melissa Neighbour, I know it's hard to believe that is her name. Melissa Neighbour is a town planner and part of the leadership group of Sydney YIMBY. Melissa, good morning.
Good morning, James. How are you?
Good. You are the most stunning example of nominative determinism, that you are a town planner and now involved in this, Ms. Neighbour.
Yeah, well, I see the issues firsthand, so I'm very passionate about them.
Yeah. Now, I think the first thing we have to clarify is, who do you represent? I'm immediately concerned that I'm talking to what is basically a front group for developers.
Well, I'm glad you've raised this. I really want to address this issue head on. So, look, James, we are a grassroots group made up of a planner, which is myself, urban economists. We have a prominent transport blogger on the team and a few people for which this is almost a hobby or a passion project, if you like. No one on our committee are developers, and we do not take any developer money. We actually review every application, even for membership, on a case-by-case basis. So on the committee, we take turns to run checks to make sure that who we grant membership to are not developers. So, yeah, it's quite a time-consuming process, but our committee is dedicated to doing it because, look, we're here for the long haul. We want to protect our integrity so that we can get the change that we want to see.
And what is that change? What do you see as the right kind of development? Perhaps do you have an example of somewhere where you're looking at?
Look, James, what we need to see in Sydney is what we call the missing middle. Right, at the moment, development is really restricted to a type of housing that's being built which doesn't have a lot of diversity. So we're seeing land release at the fringe with single-family detached dwellings or high-rise on former industrial sites, but nothing in between. So what we really need is the missing middle, and that allows people to live where they need to, say, for work, without long commutes. And it just provides that diversity that we need to enable a population to grow and expand and provide a sustainable city.
And what do you mean? What is the missing middle? What kind of dwellings are you describing there?
Yeah, we're talking about townhouses, smaller unit blocks, 3-4 stories high. But, of course, this missing middle and low rise, it needs to be able to be built absolutely everywhere. And we know that it works when we actually upzone the city to allow this type of development. So we saw in Auckland, they upzoned their entire city to allow 3 stories development and 6 stories around train stations. And that has brought down rents by about 20% over 5 years. They essentially, in New Zealand, ended single-family zoning across pretty much all of their urban landscape.
Right. And so I think we heard Minister for Planning in New South Wales saying that he was astonished to find how many local government areas zone against the development you're describing.
That's exactly right. He was surprised, and I think that's an area that they're looking at targeting, which we really want to see.
Yeah. And so what we've got at the moment is a tendency then for the big development companies, a Lendlease, a Meriton, to push ahead with getting large areas, old industrial areas and the like, and putting up giant towers.
Yeah, look, we do see a lot of that because that's where our planning system is kind of pushing development. What it's restricting and what we need is this, as I said, this missing middle, this low rise, and we need it everywhere.
Yeah. And so this is, where would this take place? I mean, what you're describing is, in a sense, the sort of the inner east, the inner west, isn't it? Which is, a lot of it is already like that. It's terrace houses, then there'll be a block of 12 and then rows of terrace houses. That's the sort of density you're describing, isn't it?
Look, we are, but we also need to see greater development around train stations. We're having the new metro rolled out, which is a fantastic initiative across Sydney, but we really need to ensure that we're now providing more homes near those rail stops. So actually this story, this concept is really, I guess, part of our origin story, because the catalyst for our group beginning was when a proposal to upzone a few blocks around a light rail stop in Leichhardt to allow 4-story development was met with really fierce opposition at a community meeting. So there were councillors and a state MP there to hear from the community, and there were a handful of our group who'd gone there to take the other side, to say yes to this proposal. And after a few people from our group spoke in favour of the proposal, and one of them actually had the mic stripped off him by the organiser, the group went down to the pub and discussed the fact that there were 50 people in that room against the 4 stories in an inner city suburb right next to public transport, and just a handful saying yes to it. So that's a key part of the issue here, is that even if councillors wanted to be pro-development right now, they find themselves handicapped by this very one-sided and limited public feedback that they're getting.
Is it that the two groups are coming from two different areas? You're coming from a urban planning, a logical overall sort of point of view. The opposition is coming from, but this is in my street, this is in my corner. I don't trust what's going to happen here. I don't want this. I'm already living here.
Oh, look, I think that's a key part of the problem. You know, we're not building the missing middle because it has to go adjacent to existing residential property, and existing homeowners don't like it.
Yeah, so this is the struggle, isn't it? What you're sitting there, you know, it's not your street that you're talking about. You're talking about it in a general urban planning sort of way. The person for whom it's their street has a completely different attitude.
They do. And it doesn't really take into account, you know, the wider situation that we're all facing. But I think also density has a bad rep. And it's become a bit of a bad word, but it can be done in a way that's sensitive to existing urban landscape. And I think this idea of, you know, the missing middle is perfect for existing urban areas. We're not talking about sky rises that are going to, you know, block sunlight and impact amenity. This is about very sensible and logical infill development.
Yep. Melissa, good to talk to you, and we'll keep in touch. And there's always plenty to talk about in this area. Melissa Neighbour is from Sydney YIMBY, a group formed in April this year, might be popping up at a council near you. Going to talk about the